Should be live, but hello. Can anyone hear me out there? Just wait a second here. If you're in the chat right now and you can hear me, please let me know. I think you have to kill the volume on this.
I'll turn my phone down a bit. I don't know why it's picking you up. It's like it's playing it in the background or something.
Don't have it playing on your desktop or something?
Nope.
Well, this is a problem.
Yeah, it is. I'll have to try to figure. Hold on a second. I'll mute out of here for a minute and try to figure it out.
Okay.
It's like it's playing it.
All right, sorry, we're having slight technical difficulties with our guest star, who for some reason is having my voice repeating itself. Can you guys hear me now? Anyone? We've got 19 people watching right now. Probably more coming in soon, I hope. Okay, all right, so you guys can hear me. All right, so I'm not sure. Does anyone have any idea? Just in case here, maybe you guys know. The feedback was on his phone, right? But the question is why? He's this having a guest on the YouTube channel requires that the person use the YouTube app to get on, right? And so he's using his phone, and I don't know why, but it seems that it's repeating what I'm saying into his volume instead of. I'm not sure how that works. Does have any of you guys got any experience with this that could give the Mad Hermit some advice before I start here? Any technical experts on YouTube there? Dice Tales says that YouTube phone app equals crap. Get on a PC. Well, here's the thing, Dice Tales. The only way you can join a live stream is with the YouTube app. It's not. You can't do it from your desktop. Apparently, you have to use the phone app to do it. But I mean, Chanter did it last time, and he didn't have this feedback, so I'm not sure what's going on. Okay, let's try. So, Patrick, if you want to do a little test run there to see if I can hear you and if it doesn't feed back.
Testing. It might be coming from it might be your computer doing it. So I don't have anything else playing. Patrick, can you hear me?
Do a little test run there. Are you playing it on the background there? Like, have you got your?
Nope.
You don't have your desktop on or your YouTube on or something?
I have my desktop on, but I don't have anything on it playing on it. I'm not on YouTube. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can also hear my voice repeating itself. But it seems to be at a delay, like if it was being shown on the.
Yeah.
Are you sure that your desktop hasn't accidentally started playing my?
Yep, I'm sure.
My live stream.
Yep, nothing.
Itself, but it seems to be at a delay. Do you have headphones?
Not for my iPhone. Well, I don't think my microphone works with them, but I can try. Let me see if I can. Hold on a second. I'll grab some and see if I can get it to do it. So just take a second. Not for my iPhone. Well, I don't think my microphone works with them, but I can.
Can you hear me? I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, and I don't hear any feedback.
Is that better?
And I think no one else is hearing any feedback. I don't know.
Hey, that might have fixed it.
I think we're good. Okay.
Now my
All right. Well, sorry about that, everyone. The technical issues. I am the furthest thing from an expert on using anything on any apps, anyways. But okay, it looks like we've got it working now. So this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlords, and this is welcome to my live stream. And tonight, I've decided to invite a guest. This is the Mad Hermit, who is I know him as well as two things. First of all, he's playing in my Sword and Caravan campaign, but he is also the publisher of the Pundit Files, my new series of short products that I've been putting out on the Red Room, and I hope at least some of you have checked them out so far. And if you haven't, please be sure to go to the Red Room website. It's in the description below the live stream, and be sure to check out some of the issues of the Pundit Files, which have all been written by me but produced by the Mad Hermit, who also, I believe, has his own well, he obviously does have his own publishing interest, and I think he's put out one product. Is that right?
I've been putting out my almanac. I got a couple issues out. Third one's coming up in the next week or so.
So all right, so Patrick, before we're going to talk about obviously we're going to talk about the Pundit Files, and we're also going to talk about some hobby news, and we're going to answer the questions of people in the live chat. Before I continue, let me mention to the people on the chat that this live stream, if you're watching it live at least, is not monetized, because that apparently is annoying when it is. So if you want to give me some support, you can do so with super chats. Now, I'm not the kind of live streamer that will only read super chats. I'll look at what other people are saying too from time to time. But obviously, if you do put out a super chat, then I will definitely read what you wrote, as long as it won't get me banned from YouTube. We're gonna be looking at a number of topics today, but I guess the first thing I'd want to know is from you, Mad Hermit. What is first of all, why did you pick the Mad Hermit as your publishing name?
From the Crusades, actually. There was a hermit who sort of began the was it the Peasants' Crusade that sort of led into the full-blown First Crusade. I visited a castle where he was called the Mad Hermit, where he visited and talked to, I don't know what it was, the lord of that castle or whatever, convinced him to give him some people to head off to the Holy Lands with. He gathered thousands of people headed out there. They were all been doomed if it hadn't been for, some militants coming along with them. They barely avoided complete annihilation a couple of times. But I liked the idea of the Mad Hermit, so I had a game store called Mad Hermit Games for a long time, and that just kind of led into what's that?
Where was that? Your game store?
I had it in Kalispell, Montana at first for a few years, and then I moved it to Missoula, Montana for. We weren't in Missoula for too long. Completely different market, and it wasn't as fun in Missoula. It was much funner up in Kalispell, Montana. So I just switched over into publishing.
I see. And before doing the Pundit Files, what have you been doing in terms of publishing? Because I've got the feeling probably that most of the people that are on the chat won't be really familiar with you yet, but I guess this is a good opportunity to give them some idea of what you do.
Some of them might. I've been around for a while. I early in the 90s, around 93, 94, I was running live action vampire games for Night Owl Studios at the time was in charge of the licensing for that sort of thing. So it was sort of adjacent to White Wolf, but you had to go through Night Owl to get licensing for live action. We were doing a great job with those games too. They were incredible what we were doing, huge sort of events. And my father-in-law at the time, he owned a publishing company. He got so tired of hearing me bitch about Night Owl Studios screwing with my licensing. He was finally like, why don't you just make your own game? You know, are they the only game in town? It had just never occurred to me that it could be done. And so I sat down and I wrote a live action vampire game in a week. 1 week, had it laid out like it just a couple weeks later by a friend, and we published it and started running our games off of that instead. And that one, I mean, those are just kind of silly games that we made back then. But the second book in that series was called Shades of Divinity, and that one actually kind of hit. It was about fallen angels. So it was in the same gothic vein as Vampire at the time, you know, but it just took a different take on it. Rather than playing bloodsuckers, you were playing these divine creatures that were trying to remember their heritage and their power and make it back to heaven, and trying to figure out whether they were being punished or had been given sort of a secret mission from God to protect humans or something from demons. So it was a very fun one. There've been a few attempts over the years of different companies trying to buy that one from me. They've usually fallen through, but that was kind of the first time I got one that sort of hit and that people liked a lot. So that got me the flavor for it. But I love role-playing games. I've been playing them since I was really little, and I just have always had it in the blood. I just wanted to keep doing that, so I've just kept working on it. My next big game would have been Cold Steel Rain. It's a pretty complex fantasy western that I put out in the early 2000s. Overly complex, perhaps. It wasn't for everybody. I like really, really crunchy game systems, and it was extra crunch.
The early 2000s was the age of crunch, wasn't it?
And well, mine was crunch with some extra crunch. But that was a pretty good game too. It's actually still one of my favorite games. It has an excellent combat system, very lethal. You can die in an instant in those games, but very fun though. So did that for a while in the early 2000s. Then we should have stayed focused on that. We got distracted into a VTT early on called GhostOrb.com, and we pushed it pretty hard. We had some money to put into it, so we put the money, you know, as much as we could in. Problem with that is that I didn't know the programming. I couldn't really manage it because I couldn't correct anything, you know, that the programmers are doing. I just kind of had to trust what was going on, and they did a pretty good job. They got us about 75% of the way there, but we ran out of money eventually and couldn't finish it. And it's too bad because that was really on the way to being something. Also, we had an idea for how to do professional games, like to hire dungeon masters to run games like an event, almost like you go to a movie. You could maybe rent you could buy a ticket, buy a seat in a game for one night, or buy a seat in a game for say 3 months that would run every Sunday by a professional DM. We could package, you know, a module or a set of modules that was for that specific event, and then have certain DMs that were just good at running that and have them run it, you know, week after week. It was a good system. We just never got it done. So
you failed, but you still sound more competent than the VTT from Wizards.
Well, yeah, we did fail, but it's down to me. I just didn't, because I'm not a programmer. I just couldn't reach in myself and make the changes that needed to happen, you know, so there was nothing I could do.
It's also very early on, right? Like at that time, but you know, like that would have been quite novel at the time period for that.
Yeah, it would have been. The voice over internet was what they call it, VoIP at the time, VoIP. It just wasn't. It was almost there. It was close. It just wasn't perfect, and it was very laggy. We had a lot of trouble with the voice stuff at that time. Nowadays, that's nothing but a thing. But back then, it was kind of a trick, and it was still working pretty good, just not close enough, you know.
Okay, and what have you been doing recently, apart from the Pundit Files?
Well, so I kind of retreated for a while after A Cold Still Rain. Couldn't think of anything else that really interested me, but then we started doing some modules. So we put out our most recent one's called Night of the Sun, and we're finishing up the second module to that one right now, and we're hoping to have it out pretty soon, probably within the next 2 or 3 months. We're hoping. We're pretty excited about that, and that module.
Sorry,
Well,
first
it's
of all,
available on.
2 questions. First, where can people buy it? And later on, you should send me the link to that. And second, is it OSR?
No, I made the mistake of writing on the back of it that it had an OSR sensibility, and I meant that, and I still do it. I meant we had avoided
why am I always surrounded by bald guys like that do that? You know, you and Venture Satanic.
So we're just trying to edge in. We want to get cozy in there with the OSR. I love the OSR. I think as far as like evolution and development of games currently, OSR is exactly where it's at. It's the only portion of the gaming industry that has real growth and real promise, and it's producing incredible stuff. What I wonder if it would be as good if Hasbro and WotC weren't driving Dungeons and Dragons into the ground as hard as they are. But on the other hand, maybe it's good they are, because the OSR products that are coming out are top of the line right now.
The OSR started as basically just a movement to be able to reprint versions of the old rules that weren't available at the time, right? And the moment that they became that the OSR really exploded was after 4E came out, because nobody wanted to play 4E, right? And that led to huge growth in the OSR, and it changed the OSR into a design movement. And now it is the perfect. I mean, it's the most successful indie game design movement ever. You know, in RPGs. I mean, and it works so well because it has an extremely low buy-in, because everybody knows how D&D rules work, right? And it has mutual compatibility among all of its products, but it also has huge amounts of innovation in the way people have taken this box, right, that you have to write within the box of what is the OSR, and done super creative things with it, you know. So that makes it very successful.
Absolutely. It's not just fascinating, it's just such a good movement. It's something to be proud of, I think, in terms of gaming. I love gaming. I have been on this game since I was a little kid. I left, I don't know what year, it must have been maybe 79, 78, something like that. My mom and my grandma had taken me into town. We gone to a movie, and the movie in the theaters was Clash of the Titans, the first one, right? The clay animation one, or slow motion animation.
Yeah.
So that must have been, 80, 79, somewhere in there. It was early. And right after that, I remember we walked across the street to a Ben Franklin store. I was pretty little, and they had a spinner rack in that store that had all the first edition hardback AD&D books. And I just sucked right up to that rack like a magnet. I was trying to figure it out. My grandma, who never denied me anything in my life, she took a look at those books, and I think she opened directly to the demon section in the monster manual. And she's like, I'm not sure what this is, if you can understand this. But from that point forward, I was always fascinated by it and trying to figure it out. Later, in like 6th grade, I ended up getting a tiny touch of a game on a field trip to Nashville, Tennessee, in like 6th grade or something. The people I was staying with, their kids got together to play it for a little bit. I think we made a character and we played for all of like 15 minutes, maybe. That's all it took. Then the kids all got bored and did something else, but I was in love, absolutely in love. And I went home. At the time, I was living in a small town in Wyoming, and there was no hope of finding that game, right? So I was telling my parents all about it, and they tried. For Christmas, they got me a module. They got me a Isle of Dread. But
it was a good module, at least. That's one
great module, but I was trying to learn how to play the game, so I didn't understand. I just couldn't figure it out. I read the damn module like 3 times, and it was like reading I'd come up to those stat blocks and just be like, oh, what is this? So then I spent the next couple years trying to back engineer the game out of that module, which I think was good in the long run. I think I became a better player from that, but eventually my parents figured it out, got me Red Box, and I was off to the races.
That's great. That's a great story. So someone here said 81, I think. I think Clash of Titans was in 1981, apparently.
That might be about it. It was early. I was
Lick's
little.
Lick's Universe says bald guys can't OSR. That's a law of nature.
I saw that. I started laughing when I saw that up there. There's a lot of us baldies out here in the gaming universe. I've discovered.
Point, those of us who aren't bald yet are probably going to be at some point.
Eventually, we all get there.
Says, how is OSR indie when it's based on OD&D? Well, the OSR is based on old school D&D. It's not just original D&D, but also, first edition, second edition, the basic expert set, the BCMI, and the rules cyclopedia. It's based on all of those, but it's indie in that from the second wave of the OSR onwards, instead of just reproducing those rules, people have been saying, well, how can we change these rules? How can we change them to do a different thing? How can we change them to fit a specific setting? How do we do it to change it into a totally different genre, right? Like there's superhero games that are OSR. There's, commando games of World War II fighting that's OSR, Westerns, all the crazy
that skeleton can be used for anything. It's how you dress that skeleton, and my God, some people have really done a good job with that. I'm really impressed with the stuff that's come out.
I think there are some things that it probably does worse than others, but I wasn't totally convinced by superhero OSR, but yeah, it's true. Dice Tail says fat ball guys rock the OSR. There you go. All right, so now you have produced OSR products, of course, because you've been the publisher of up to now 6 OSR products, because you've been publishing the Pundit Files, and I wanted to give you some attention as a kind of a reward for that, because I think those of you who have looked at, I don't know how many of the chat here have picked up an issue of the Pundit Files. I know it's sold quite a lot, actually. I'm very pleased with how it's going so far, because I wasn't sure, it's not on drive-through, it's not on Amazon, it's only in the Red Room, and I wasn't sure if it was going to sell a lot or not, and it has done pretty well, so that's great. And I think any of you who've bought an issue will say that for being a product line that is small supplements, very, very lo-fi, let's say, it's actually got really nice production values. The covers are great. The interior outline of it is all really good. It's even got artwork that's pretty good, in comparison, for example, it compares very evenly with the Pundit Presents, which was done by at first Presses and then Spectre Press, who kept using the same format, that's pretty high quality, I think. So
well, look at my business partner Ashil, Sean Taylor is an incredible artist, and he can turn around on a dime. He can turn around work on a dime, which has really helped me with everything. That's how we manage to do anything that we ever put out. It really comes down to Ash's art, and he's good stuff. I put links to him in those in the Pundit Files. Anybody looking for a good artist, Sean is really someone to talk to. His ability to produce what you're asking for in just the most rapid sense possible at a high skill level, and he can copy styles, different types of artists. If you have one you like, he can nail those artists. I'm really blessed to have Sean in my corner. He's a spectacular artist.
Anyone who's done RPG books or products knows that one of the great stepping stones, one of the points where you're very likely to end up having terrible delays, is with the art. So getting an artist who is good and gets stuff in on time is a real gem, actually.
Well, I think it's because he's a gamer himself. He plays too. Like we play all the time. He helped me play test through Cold Steel Rain, and my God, because he's immersed in the game itself, he can always come up with just incredible artwork for it. It's fun to watch him too. When we lived in the same town, we used to just sit at the desk and he'd be drawing, I'd be writing, and we could talk and swap ideas. It was great.
Well, I definitely do think the art is really good in these products, so that's great. Dice Tales here says you're famous enough as your own brand, Pundit. You guys can make it go without Amazon or drive-through. Well, that was kind of the experiment, wasn't it? To see that, and also I wanted to do something that would help bring more attention to the Red Room store, and because I know that I'm not the only, like, they publish all their own stuff there, but then there's also other people who've been publishing stuff there, and so this gives.
And they sure are good people. I mean, those are I like Miguel that owns it. He's a great guy. He's a very nice guy. I've talked to him a little bit in emails. He's wonderful.
Yeah, he's very good. And I'm not sure. I don't know if you guys have heard, but Wizards of the Coast has just announced that they're no longer going to make D&D books in Portuguese. I'm not sure if that's the Red Room's fault or not. I'll need to ask them. I don't think they're on tonight because their time zone's totally different, right? But so we need to start this rumor that the Red Room got Portuguese banned from Wizards of the Coast. Honestly, though, I can tell you that probably the real reason for that, like RPGs. They're in South America, RPGs are big in some places and not in others, right? They're fairly popular in the Southern Cone, right? And in Argentina, in Uruguay. I'm not too sure about Chile or Paraguay, but they're also really huge in Brazil, right? And Brazil is the only country in South America that has its own RPG industry, let's say. There's a number of different publishers that have made games, RPG games in Brazil, right? And Brazil's obviously the market for, like, nobody's going to make these books for Portugal, right? It was made for Brazil. However, just like in Argentina and Uruguay, a large percentage of the majority, let's say, of gamers, especially serious gamers, especially the ones that DM, who are the ones that buy the books, are fluent in English. Or at the very least, they can read fluently in English, right? There are some that you probably couldn't have them play in a game that was all in English, but they can read the English, And so a lot of them actually prefer to get the books in English. And I suspect that it's just that it wasn't selling enough to justify it, because they also realized that, these guys are going to buy it in English anyways,
Right.
That's just a theory, but it seems to match my experience of the RPG scene down here.
Every trip and stumble that they make with Dungeons and Dragons, I'm not being hyperbolic. It hurts my heart. I love that game. I know they have just driven it into the dirt. I'd say the last 5 books were just all pieces of utter crap. I can't imagine someone buying that's a hardcore lover of D&D and thinking, wow, this is up to par, because Jesus, it's not. They just don't know what they have at all. They don't know what they're dealing with. They don't have people there anymore that know what they're dealing with. So it's a lost cause entirely. They may make a neat video game, but I really, really highly doubt that it will convert Dungeons and Dragons in any meaningful way.
Yeah. Well,
I heard that about Mongoose.
We're going to talk a little bit later about the newest D&D product, technically, from Wizards. But first, I thought that since I've got you on here and since you were the publisher, we would talk a little bit more about the Pundit Files and look at, the ones that have come out already very briefly, and then talk about the next couple that are coming out. So the Pundit Files comes out every 2 weeks on a Tuesday, and again, only at the Red Room. And so far, we've put out 6 of them. The first one is called Shaking Up Your Campaign, which is a or Tables to Shake Up Your Campaign, which is a collection of random generators to make campaign altering events. It's a pretty simple book. You know, it was my first issue, just like the first issue of Pundit Presents was Dungeon Chef, which is a guide to what happens when you eat monsters. You know,
Oh, that's cool.
I usually decide to start a soft start there, right? But it's an interesting book because it's got, you know, like if you're a DM and your campaign is kind of like stuck in some way, you can use those tips. You can roll on them, or you can look through them and pick something or whatever to decide on something that's just going to completely, you know, turn around the campaign in a totally different direction. The second one, which we'll talk maybe a little more about, is called The Dead City, and this is an adventure, and it's actually based on an adventure from my Sword and Caravan campaign, right? Like it's something that actually happened in the campaign, where the characters. Now I don't remember. Were you already in the campaign at that point? Oh no, you were not.
Nope, nope, not yet.
You don't have personal experience because the Mad Hermit joined the campaign after another player had to leave, so he was recruited later on. But yeah, the group at the time had gone the northern route along the Taurus Mountains, heading towards Baghdad. And along the way, they passed the town of Haran, and they found out that there was a ruined city to the north of it, and further up the hills. And they went up there to check it out, right? And it's interesting because it was the most D&D adventure that they've done in the whole campaign, like the most classically D&D type of adventure, because it has random monster encounters along the way, and then it has a potential encounter with a group of giants, and then you get to the city, and the city was damned, right? Like it was a doomed city, and it has basically a curse that which is why the locals are terrified of it. That at night, the living dead, the dead of the city come to life and attack people, right? And the one thing that is like, well, I mean, you can go around looting the city and whatnot, but the thing that's the big attraction is this tower that belonged to these magicians, the Sabaeans that ruled the city at the time. That is the only thing that's still intact there, right? And so, of course, the tower itself is full of the living dead as well. So there was a lot of adventure. It was a crazy adventure because like a couple of people, nobody died in that adventure, but a couple of people were very close to dying.
I got to see a scene from that adventure actually. Just what was it, last week or the week before? I was watching one of our other players was running a game live, and he was running that adventure, and they had gotten to the part with the giants, but the players were really clever. They bought their way out of it. They traded a camel and a silver sword to the giants to get out of it. I thought they were doomed, but they made it out.
Interesting detail about those giants. Those are based on actual myths from the region, right? Those giants are called Uzu. And the story goes that and this is in Sword and Caravan, right? So if you picked up Sword and Caravan, you'd know this already. But the Uzu were this race of giants that ruled in that area long ago, and they're very tough. They're very powerful. They can blow a gust of wind that can knock a man down, and they're very aggressive. But long ago, they lost a war against humans, right? And ever since then, they've been, relegated to the Wilderlands, and so they're actually somewhat cowardly, right? So that if things start going even a little bad for them, their morale score is against people is relatively low for the type of fearsome monster that they are, right? So it's an interesting thing because you can sometimes try your luck with them and they might all just run away,
See if you can bullshit your way out of it. Puff up
by their failure.
Do they have in that mythology? Do they have red hair like they do in giant mythology? I mean, well, at least modern giant mythology. You know what I'm talking about? How there's beliefs of like giants their bodies buried in mounds in the United States, that sort of thing.
Well, I don't. I didn't actually look that up exactly, but the imagery of the Uzu that was used in Sword and Caravan does seem to have kind of reddish hair. So that might be true actually. I'm not sure. I didn't
I like that.
specifically notice
I'm
that
sticking with
in
that.
looking at the lore of it. You know, I did a lot of research on Sword and Caravan, and especially things like the monsters and everything. All the monsters are obviously based on myths ranging all the way from Arabia to China, right? And so in the encounter tables in the Wilderlands supplement, you've got regional encounter tables that are reflective that the monsters of the specific regions are the ones you're likely to find in those places, you know. Um, so it's interesting. But yeah, I'm not totally sure if they were supposed to always have red hair or not, but maybe it was a thing because the picture of the Uzu does seem to have red hair. Um, let me see here. Oh, we've got a couple of players here from my Sword and Caravan game as well. Hey, Draxonian and Universe.
House of Mirage.
Right. Universe says, I like random tables, tends to upset other restaurant goers when I sit down, though.
Yeah, I saw that. Surly's always causing trouble. I see him in all the chat.
Yeah. So the next issue of the Pundit Files. Oh, hang on. We've got a super chat from Space Zeus, who's here as well. All right. Welcome, Space Zeus. It says the story of the Giant of Kandahar inspired how I handled them. I guess he's referring to it his campaign, which I guess is the one you saw, right?
Yeah. Space Zeus was running it. Yep, definitely.
I know that Space Zeus is running a certain Caravan game of his own. Thank you for
House of Mirage.
Yeah, the House of Mirage thing is because in the Sword and Caravan campaign that I'm running, one of the players decided that the group should have a name, right? Like the original campaign started with the Third Crusade, and the player characters were all Europeans that were traveling on crusade with Richard Lionheart. And then when that finished, they were recruited to escort an NPC monk, like a Christian monk, that had the idea to travel all across the Silk Road, to travel to the east, and everywhere he went to try to contact Christian communities in these distant lands that had been cut off for a very long time, and to try to get them back into contact with Rome. And so they're traveling along with this monk. And at some point, one of the player characters got it in his head to try to give a name to this group, which were already unusual because they were like some of the earliest Europeans to be traveling the Silk Road after the peace treaty between Saladin and Richard. And so he started calling the group the House of Mirage, you know, because he himself has glamour magic, and so he does illusions. Yep. I think that's why.
So he's doing illusions, yeah.
And it's kind of stuck for the rest of the group, I guess. At first, they were like, "What the hell is this?" And now they're kind of like, "Yeah, we're the House of Mirage."
It's a good name. That's been a fun game. My first character died hideously, was blown up. But I'm playing a wizard now. Well, what do you call them? Magisters in Sword and Caravan. But he's really kind of oily, sleazy kind of guy, and I'm trying to build a trade in camels.
You're a want-to-be camel merchant.
Yep.
Howdy, Kazdoc. So all right, so the next product on the list is also, I guess, for potentially for Sword and Caravan, but I could see it being used by other people for other things, which is the Song Dynasty Martial Artist class, which is a class for your classic kind of wuxia renegade martial artist. And, you know, martial arts, as we know it today in China, like all of those styles today, the earliest ones began to emerge during the Song Dynasty at the exact time of, you know, the Sword and Caravan campaign, or just about. You know, it really started about 80 years earlier or so. But you know, so in this supplement, I talk about that history because it was largely one guy who began to teach martial art techniques outside of monasteries. And I present the class and 4 different martial arts styles that were really, that really originated at that time. That were all kind of originated by this one dude. And so it lets you, if you want to have a character who's a martial artist in, the Lion and Dragon rules, there you are. As opposed to like a mystic like the sage is in Sword and Caravan. Then we did number 4, which is fast NPC generation, and that is a bunch of tables and rules that lets you, there's always a time, at least in my campaigns, it happens almost constantly, where there's just some random NPC that you have there that you think is going to interact with the player characters for 1 second, and for whatever reason, they get interested in expanding that interaction. All of a sudden, if you're the DM, you have to decide, well, what's this guy really like, and what's his story, and whatever, right? And so these tables let you quickly generate a whole, kind of background for an NPC that you need to generate very fast, So that's I think that's
those are good. I like those charts. Those are ones that I would use because your players do sometimes just adopt an NPC. They pull him out of the background of the story, and suddenly the spotlight's on him, and you're like, God, I hadn't thought about that NPC at all. I have no idea what they do.
Yeah, it's happened to me tons of times. Some of whom later become like NPCs that I use again and again in other campaigns,
Yeah. Yeah. We have some really good NPCs in that campaign that are really fun. That's one of the funner parts of that campaign is our NPCs.
Yeah. They're well, I've got a whole stable of NPCs that I reuse over campaigns. So some of the players that I've had that have played in more than one campaign of mine are going like, hang on, this guy was in the,
Yep. I heard that. Yeah.
Albion campaign, and he's just like basically the same with just slight differences, So after that, we did the Silk Road Guide to Baghdad, which is a city guide, and it's it has a map of Baghdad, and it has all of the description of what the city is like at the time of the Sword and Caravan campaign, which is around 1192 or so. It details all the different neighborhoods, the things that are in them, and it has adventure queues. And so, if you're looking to play in Baghdad, I don't know, if you're running an Assassin's Creed game or something, I guess you could use it. You can obviously use it if you're running Sword and Caravan. It vastly expands the information on Baghdad from what there is in the Gazetteer. And it can also be used as like a large city in any kind of like pseudo-Arabian section of a traditional fantasy game, right? There's going to be a lot of stuff there that you can plug it right in, and then the latest one is siege rules. I had someone, I don't remember when, I think it was, I don't remember if it was on a live stream or if it was on the comments to a video where someone said that I'd done rules on adjudicating mass combat and stuff like that, and I've had rules on managing domains, but I never did one about sieges, and I realized that's true, and I decided to do it here. So this supplement tells you all about the way to handle a siege in a way that will reflect what sieges were really like, which is that sometimes you would have this kind of initial attempted assault on the city, right? And then so there are mechanics for figuring out that assault, and a lot of times those assaults wouldn't really work. And so then the next part of the siege is that basically the city is surrounded, cut off from all access, and then there's a bunch of things that can happen during that time, right? You can have discontent on either side from the troops. You can have disease start to spread. Obviously, the city or the fortress or whatever that's being besieged can run out of resources. It might be low on food or water or ammo or people. And then there can be other things that can happen, right? Someone else might show up to try to rescue the place that's being besieged, And of course, you can have other attempts at besieging it, or you can try sneaky ways to do it, whether it's digging tunnels or trying to bribe certain people inside the fort or the city to surrender it.
Earth elementals. That's my way of approaching that.
Yeah, or magic. Yeah.
That, by the way, that is my favorite issue that we've done. Not because of the presentation of it. It's presented well, but I really like those rules. Combat, mass combat, and involving your player characters in mass combat. That's always a bit tricky, and I like really slick systems that do that. Because it's never something I necessarily want to sit down and figure out myself. And when I try, the systems get really huge. I like yours; it's very elegant, goes quick, gets right down to the point, and that's kind of what you need.
Yeah,
that's my favorite one.
Fan. I mean, I know that some people love it, right? But I've never been a big fan of very complex mass combat systems in an RPG. You know,
because it can just get in the way.
Yeah, a lot of times they either turn out to be like way too much bookkeeping or math or whatever, or they end up being
a miniature war game. It can end up devolving back toward the miniature war game rules, and you kind of need it not to fall that low. I mean, you could do that. I've done that,
well,
and that's fine. But
if you're gonna do that, you might as well just pull out Warhammer or Chainmail or something and use those rules to adjudicate the battle, right? Or whatever else, you know, Memoir 44 or something, you know, like any of those. But if what you want is to be able to resolve this in a way that isn't just by a single roll, let's say, but you want it to have some detail. You know, the idea is to create a method that is relatively rules light, but that will give the right amount of complexity to allow a lot of different possibilities of what could turn out, you know, and I think that's
you want a system in place that the players can kind of affect, because, you know, maybe they can't turn the whole battle, but they can affect their little piece of it. You want that reflected through. You want a cinematic take on it for the players, and it can be a real high point of a game, but it's tricky to get that balance. And amazingly, there haven't been a lot of real good systems put out for that. It's so crucial to role-playing games that you'd think there'd be more attention applied to it, but it is complex and tough. For instance, I myself would not want to undertake trying to figure that out. I could just see myself overcomplicating that all to hell. But I like simple ones, quick ones that can allow me to kind of get an idea what the battlefield's doing, put the players in the middle of that, have them take their actions and see if they can affect the outcomes. But still keep them really involved and let the dice be kind of ruling how the battles are going on around them. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Oh, we've got another super chat from Roy Goodman. Thank you. $2. And he says, I need a POD of the Pundit Files. Well, this is the thing. Just like RPG Pundit Presents, I made a whole lot of issues. And then when we had enough of them, we did a compilation volume, which was the Old School Companion 1, and then World of the Last Sun, and then after that, the Old School Companion 2, and now the Gonzo Fantasy Companion. And there's still going to be 2 more of those before we're done with the Pundit Presents stuff. And so I'm sure that once, you know, if I keep going with this, and I intend to, once we've got enough issues of the Pundit Files out, then we will put together a compilation volume. And there, I would want it to be print on demand, which means it might not be in the Red Room. You know, it might have to be on drive-through, because the Red Room, I don't think, does POD. Unless by then they do. You never know. They might.
The drive-through got in an argument with me on my last issue of the Mad Hermit's Almanac, because I had used the abbreviation DM for Dungeon Master. And I got to tell you, it made me so mad. Like, you cannot take the term Dungeon Master from me. I'm sorry. That may be copyrighted, I suppose, but that makes me furious, because at this point, doesn't that just belong to us? I mean,
yeah, it's interesting. I guess they're being extra cautious about wizards. That's curious. I never saw that happen until now. I wonder.
I saw that Dragon Slayer has started to use the term maze controller. Do you know what that's from? That's from that old movie, Mazes and Monsters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is excellent. That's just chef's kiss. That's so sweet.
Well, I usually use GM, like Game Master, because, you know, I recognize that DM is specific to to D&D.
Well, so
I think at this point,
Steambub is down there saying just use Game Master. I hear you, Steambub, and I thought about that, but no, I'm a dungeon master. I'm not a game master.
I'm not a lawyer, right? But from what I understand, there are times when a brand, if it allows its brand to become representative of the product itself, like Kleenex, for example, instead of tissues, or Xerox instead of photocopiers, at that point they end up losing. In a court of law, they would likely lose a battle to block that, right? But it's so the problem is though that would require that kind of a court case, right? And most people wouldn't want to do that, and certainly I can understand why Drive-Thru wouldn't want to be involved in that if that's the case, right?
Right. Surly Unicorn said dungeon manager.
Well, maybe
I could argue that. It'd be like, I mean dungeon manager, obviously. That's why I'm using DM. I don't think that'll fly, but
hello to Diversity and Dragons. It's nice to see that you've come onto my live stream, even though I almost never can see your live streams or most of your live streams because you do them on Wednesdays, and on Wednesdays I'm hanging out with Bill the Elf's Player, and he I go once a week to his place, and we watch TV shows that we're streaming or whatever together, and he is an incredible chef, which is the main reason I go there because he's like he's like a Michelin star level chef. The guy is unbelievable. Wow. He's probably the best chef in the country, and he doesn't actually work in a restaurant, but I don't miss that. But I think Bill the Elf's Player is going on a trip sometime soon, so it'll be at least a couple of weeks where I hope I'll be able to make it to watch a full episode of Diversity and Dragons live.
I love Diversity and Dragons. That's one of my favorites to watch. It's nice to see him in the chat. There's a really good show. He never backs out. He bites in and tears it apart. I like that a lot. I'm glad that there are people out there doing that, because unbelievably, these crazy people have come in and taken over the game of nerds.
So before we go on to talk about future episodes, tell me a bit more about this product that you're putting out right now. What was it? The Almanac?
Mad Hermit's Almanac. Yeah, so putting together your Pundit Files, it just dawned on me, I have just metric tons of gaming material. I've been doing this a long time, and I write all the time for it. That doesn't mean I'm a good writer. It just means I write a lot of D&D stuff. And so I have a lot. And I thought, God, I could start to maybe just put together some of the random charts and things that I've made over the years and put them out. So that's what I've been doing. And I put my Mad Hermit Almanac #1, I put in 3 articles, I think, in that one. I put a set of huge charts that were originally published in the Dungeon Master's Guide for Cold Steel Rain back in 90. Whoa, no, sorry. That was 2003, 2004, something like that. I just kind of revamped them a little bit so that they'd work for a fantasy game rather than a Western game. And but the most important thing in that first issue is I put in my dice oracle. And dice oracles I just thought I kind of had my own special little dice oracle till I found out that solo gamers rely on dice oracles like all the time. I didn't know that till just a few years ago, because the idea of solo gaming seems kind of weird, but I picked up Ironsworn a few years ago. Look, that's an impressive game. Have you seen that one? I love that game. It has some ingenious systems. That's a clever dungeon master who made that game. It's very good. I suggest anybody take a look at it just in terms of the kind of creativity of the systems involved in that game. But I put my own dice oracle into my first issue of the Almanac. It's D12 based. I've been using it for many years. It's ultra simple, just has 2 axes. You're looking for even, odd for kind of yes/no results. And then you grade the degree of the result by, like, the lower the odd number, the more negative, or the more, toward the negative side, whether that means bad or just no. And then the higher the positive number on the D12, the more of whatever it is. So say you're trying to figure out, like, what an NPC knows about the local lord. You grab your D12, You roll it, I get a 9. So it means he doesn't know a whole lot about the guy, right? So that just kind of gives me an idea right away. He might know a couple little things, but not much, right? So I use it for everything. I always find that wherever fate, I like to let fate reach into the game and take a hand, because it's up number 1, Meatball. Meatball has made it.
We got a meatball in the house. So, all right. No, we're still good. I think we're still
But
good.
That's what I'm doing with the almanac. I'm just putting in, I have a whole lot of weird little charts and stuff that I just use for my own games. And so I'm kind of pulling them together. I'm trying to get together the 3rd issue. And I was telling you before the show, I was putting in an adventure that I wrote many years ago, and I've been moving and I got stuff in storage and things, but I still have pretty good organization, but I've lost the map for the one I'm trying to put in there. So I'm trying to back engineer the map from the descriptions. I know I can see in my head some of the rooms, but I don't know how they all line up. So I'm trying to figure that out. It's the first time I've ever had to back engineer a dungeon map from just the descriptions.
That's tricky, for sure.
It's fun.
And where are you? You're selling these on drive-through, is that right?
Drive-through and on the Red Room.
Oh, and on the Red Room. Look
yeah,
at me.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
Didn't realize that. I guess we started doing that after I started Pundit Files, because at the time I had looked at, when I was considering the Red Room, I looked at what they had and I didn't see it there, but I'm guessing that's new now. So
They're there.
Pick up the almanac either from drive-through or from the Red Room, and
yep.
I'm sure that they're worth taking a look at. All right.
So I got little eyes and they don't see anything. Somebody said I got big glasses.
Yeah, I assume that was you, not me, but I don't know. I've got big glasses too, I guess. So your next issue is going to be this adventure? Is that what you're?
The next issue of the almanac will be, yes. It's going to take me a couple days to get that map recreated, and then I'll throw that together and get it up there. But our next big project is the second one in the Night of the Sun series, and it's a pretty large module and should be out in 2 or 3 months. We'll kickstart it. I like to have it done, though, beforehand, so that when we kickstart it, at the end of the Kickstarter, I can just send it right off to the printer and get it printed, and they don't have to wait for it to finish or anything like that. And we're getting very close. What's that?
That's a module for what game?
It's the second module in the Night of the Sun series. And the Night of the Sun campaign series is just a fun campaign series that allows you to destroy your campaign world, right? So, like, you can play to try to save the world. You can play as the good guys, or you can play it as evil characters out to destroy the world, in which case you're in competition you're in the cult of Orcus, and you're competing against rival cults of Orcus to try to gain this thing called the Sun Killer Cauldron. And if you make the correct sacrifice into this cauldron, it will eat the sun and allow Orcus to emerge from the abyss into the planet. And then what we thought we would do another 3 modules where, if you're playing evil characters, you manage to raise Orcus out of this Sun Killer Cauldron and destroy the world, then your characters will become like, by the end of the campaign series, your characters could become the big baddies, sort of the lieutenants of Orcus ruling the world, right? So then you start the games again, now playing as characters that have to build their way up to face those evil characters that you played to that point, which I think is pretty fun. But we're just to module 2. It'll be a while before we get all the way through.
But is it for 5e or is it system neutral? Or?
Yeah, because we did Night of the Sun based on sort of a 5e mechanic. We're gonna continue that way with the rest of them. But I don't even know that those mechanics matter that much anymore. I mean, it's so easy to use that for OSR. You just strip out the 5e bullcrap that you don't want and use the OSR rules. The monsters are basically the same. Just pull them up.
That's absolutely true. And I mean, there is also a very large hobby of third-party 5e products that do quite well, but that's the truth that there are, I don't think a lot of us, certainly I don't very much look at 5e, all the 5e products are in DM's Guild and stuff like that. But I would bet that there's, because there's quite a few of them that are really good sellers, and I'm sure that almost all of those are going to be vastly better products than anything Wizards is putting out. So
Oh, absolutely. No, that's
yeah,
what I was saying earlier, how much I really love the OSR, because they are blooming while Wizards is declining and dying, and the OSR is just bursting with creativity. It's absolutely the place to be in role-playing games. If you love role-playing games, that's where you want to be.
but I figure that there's also probably a lot of those third-party 5e products that would be quite easy to use if you're an OSR person. Like if you
Yeah,
can get
yeah.
over the fact that they're originally designed for 5e.
Well, I just assume most dungeon masters are like me. I don't think, very few people are going to be intimidated by the prospect of switching a 5e module into any OSR version.
Yeah,
It it's just too easy. The skeleton is in there. You just got to strip out some of the dumb stuff around the edges.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I hate Mondays. I don't know if this is a question for you. Or what's your favorite day of the week?
My favorite day of the week.
Yeah,
I don't believe I have one. They just sort of all bleed into one. I don't know.
same thing for me. Uh, that happens when you don't have a real job. So the next Pundit Files product that is going to be coming out. When is it going to be coming out? It's coming out on the 5th of March. It's already done, thankfully, and it's another
barely
adventure.
by the skin of our teeth on that one.
It's called the Confraternity of Death, and it's an adventure, in England for Lion and Dragon, and it's set in the city of Coventry, and it involves a sinister cult that is engaging in a set of ritualistic murders, but there's some twists to it. I don't want to reveal those here because I usually try to keep spoilers for those types of adventures in case somebody ends up running them and you don't want somebody to know if they're the twists to it. But there is an interesting kind of twist to it, and it's an investigative adventure, and it involves a lot of details about the city itself and its different power groups. And I think it's a pretty good adventure. So that's the next one to look for there. And then number 8 is going to be Magic of the Kunlun Mountains, which is a source book for Tibetan magic and Tibetan magic rituals and things like that. For Lion and Dragon, obviously usable in Sword and Caravan. Back then, Tibetans were not thought of so much as these like peaceful Dalai Lama types that we think of them today. They were actually fairly tough dudes back then, and at one point, not during the time of the Sword and Caravan, but about 300 years earlier, they had swept in to an area of what is the Silk Road and had like conquered a whole kingdom there. But in particular, during the time period of Sword and Caravan, in the eastern parts of the Silk Road, Tibetan wizards were particularly revered for their magical tricks, and so this source book details a whole bunch of magic that comes out of the Tibetan occult tradition, and will be probably really interesting. I mean, you can use it obviously in all kinds of other settings and whatnot. So
there's a Tibetan saint that was started out as a wizard practicing the traditional Tibetan magic forms, and he advanced in it. And by legend, he was trying to kill a rival, like a rival over a woman, and he ended up destroying his entire village, his home village, including his family, and drove him then toward Buddhism, and he became a saint.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories of that sort of thing, and I talk a little bit about it in in the book about, for example, at that time in the Jia kingdom, you had the court wizard of the emperor was a Tibetan wizard, and the first time that Genghis Khan comes to try to conquer the Jia kingdom, that wizard supposedly creates a flood that stops Genghis Khan. So, the next time Genghis Khan comes along and does end up conquering the Jia kingdom, he actually recruits that wizard and makes him one of his court wizards. You know,
Of course.
So it's good stuff. Let me look
Yeah,
at
that
some
makes sense.
comments here. Steambob says corncob pipes for the win. I love corncob pipes. I mean, they cost almost nothing and they smoke incredibly well. And Spaces says, are you going to do an adventure of that brutal encounter in the mountains that killed half of the party? I'm not sure yet, Spaces, but that might be a future adventure supplement for
and aged your character like 30 years.
That was an especially brutal adventure.
Very brutal adventure.
River Rat says, I love your YouTube channel. Well, thank you very much, River Rat. I hope that you're enjoying the live stream. So I think that Kunlun Mountains is the latest one, is the one that you're now working on, right? So
yep.
You don't know the next few yet, but the next ones after that, the next one after that is going to be, which I've already written, is historically authentic dungeons, which is going to be about making what type of dungeon-like environments you can have that aren't like the D&D dungeons, which make no sense at all in terms of like history, right? But rather would be reflective of actual structures that you could find in a more historical type of setting, so looking at ruined temples, catacombs, mines.
Yeah, the catacombs of Paris. Have you been there?
Yeah, although actually the catacombs of Paris are a late Renaissance, early Age of Enlightenment.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, they were actually built much later than people think.
They are enormous. I went through them, and I was wearing cowboy boots when I did, and I really regretted it for two reasons. One, my feet hurt by the end, but two, the leather on my boots picked up a fungus from the bones, something, and yeah, literally, it took all sorts of hell to get those off my boots. But
the story of the catacombs of Paris is very interesting because in the Middle Ages, what Paris did have was a whole network of underground mines. And so those mines are something that I talk about in this book, in this product. That they were exploited from somewhere around the 11th or 12th century onwards, and so in the medieval era, mines were not particularly safe places, right?
No.
And in fact, there were multiple occasions where you had like mine collapses, and also sometimes you had like sinkholes that ended up happening in the city because of the mines underneath, right? Like there was a saying at one point that the whole city was being held up by a bunch of wooden girders under the mine. They excavated so much down there, and they got out a lot of different products, but in particular, it was a mineral that they used to create plaster of Paris, which is why it's called plaster of Paris. Which was a very important material in the time.
They were not wheelchair accessible, no.
No, definitely not wheelchair accessible. If you're playing in medieval Paris, you won't go down into the catacombs, but you could go down into the mines, and the mines had a lot of interesting stuff too.
What were they mining?
Well, they were mining. I don't remember if it was gypsum or something. That they were mining. The main thing that there was various things that they were mining, because I think there was lead down there and stuff like that. But the main thing, the main product that they got out of it was the mineral that they used to create this plaster of Paris, which was a very useful industrial resource of medieval France.
Yeah.
Steambub says Invisible College Catacombs Adventure Supplement. No, but I don't know when I'm going to do it yet, but sometime soon there will be an Invisible College supplement for the Pundit Files, which is going to be a supplement for running an Invisible College campaign set in the 1930s instead of the modern era, right? The Invisible College usually is set in the present day, basically. But obviously, the 1930s was a very interesting time to play an Invisible College campaign because you had the whole build up towards World War II, and the occult factions were in a very different style. And obviously, the big enemies there wouldn't be the Black Lodge; they would be the Order of Thule, who had taken over Nazi Germany. You know, so I think that'll be a very interesting product for people who enjoy Invisible College. Steambob says Wretched Epoch crossover. Well, I don't. I probably shouldn't say anything, but there's some possibility of a Wretched Epoch and Invisible College crossover happening, but not on my end, but rather on the Red Room's end. So,
boy, they are fast. That guy Miguel is fast.
Those guys put out stuff faster than me, which is like pretty freaking remarkable. You know, I thought I was the most prolific OSR guy around, but they really give me a run for their money because they
do put it out fast, and it's good work too.
Books, yeah, like it's just incredible. Like I mean, they did all these books in 1 year, and then the next year they're doing the second edition of all of those books with like vastly expanded content. You know, so they just write like maniacs. It's great. Then after Historically Authentic Dungeons, I'm going to be doing a source book on historically authentic cities, which is about how to make your cities, fantasy cities or whatever, if you want them to feel more like what a real medieval city felt like. And I talk about, you know, how cities worked, how their governments worked, what the rules were like in these cities, what the architecture was like, all kinds of stuff that lets you add a more authentic kind of element to your fantasy cities. And then the last one that I've got on board is going to be another adventure, also set in England, called The Mendicant. And it is, it's kind of an adventure where the player characters are contacted or hired, depending on their social class, by this wealthy merchant in the city of Chester, whose son has fallen under the sway of a lay preacher that is very charismatic and who is quickly gaining followers in the city. And it's an interesting adventure because it's more of a kind of a moral dilemma adventure, because you don't know if the lay person, if this lay guy is actually a real holy man, or if he's a dangerous cult, or what the story is there, and then what to do about it, right? Because there's a lot of potential pitfalls to whatever the player characters decide to do in it. So it's a slightly more cerebral adventure than just here's an evil cult and you got to uncover them, you know. But yeah, those are the next upcoming products in that line, you know. Let me see here.
Pripyat, on the other hand, is something I'd like to see firsthand. What the hell is Pripyat?
That is Chernobyl, I believe.
Oh, God. No, thanks.
Kazdog says, quick question, if you have the inclination, I hear different answers from different people, but what would you say is the heart or even the soul of OSR? I feel like it can be very nebulous. Well, to me, and I've said this before, the OSR is fundamentally now a design movement. It has been since about like 2010 or so, you know.
I think that's right.
It's a movement of game designers who are making systems, settings, and adventures, all of which have to be within the limits of the most fundamental parts of the D&D rules, of the old school D&D rules, okay?
Yep.
And what that means is that also the products that are made for it are intercompatible, right? Like you could get one of my books and one of Kevin Crawford's books, or one of James Raji's books, or anybody else's, and you can mix up the stuff that's in there because they will be basically compatible with each other. So that is the thing that makes it successful, are those two qualities, right? That it's the focus is on design that has a classical style, but that has interesting twists to this, like, and that's part of what makes it so successful, is that other design movements never had it. So, like, for example, indie storytelling games, every one of them is different. It's their own thing, right?
Yeah.
And you're basically able. The idea there was, you be as creative as you like, right? But be as creative as you like sometimes ends up being less creative, and definitely less functional, than if you're told, okay, here is this box, right? And you have to, whatever you do, you have to be within the box. But you also have to be really creative within that box, because there's been 2,000 other products that have been made in that box, right? And that's what ends up differentiating the OSR products that stand out from other ones that don't, because there are lots of OSR products that have come out and have been only mildly successful or not especially successful. And then there are the ones that become bestsellers on drive-through. It's because those ones do something really interesting within that box, right? Because you also you can bend the different aspects of it to suit a setting or a genre, but you can't completely break it, because if you get to the point where it's no longer compatible with any other products, then it's not going to work as OSR, So I think that's the key to what the OSR is about.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good way to look at it. Is that when I hadn't considered it as a design movement until I heard you mention that last year sometime, and then I started looking as that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and
that is what ties it together, and the
Yeah,
skeleton, the skeleton of that old game in there,
Yeah, absolutely, and the network externalities of being able to quote Ryan Dancy, of being able to like pick up a half dozen different OSR books from a half dozen different designers, and you can use them all in the same campaign, in theory.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Kazdoc says constraint breeds creativity. It really does. Yeah. Insane Nerd Rambling says no more magical promic smogmorts. Yeah, well, I've said in other videos, I think that the age of those types of products are coming to an end, even in Wizards, because the plan in Wizards is to go full VTT, and if they do that, you really can't do those sorts of adventures for the VTT. You have to do adventures that match the characteristics of the virtual tabletop, which are going to be largely dungeon adventuring, combat focused, maybe overland stuff, but it's not going to be Magic Prom, right? It's not.
Let me. I'd like to make a prediction on VTT, since I was a bit of a trailblazer in the VTT development sphere way back in the day. I still don't think they've touched on what's going to blow it through the ceiling, and that's literally a working system for professional dungeon masters. I believe that when they figure that out, when they figure out a way that you can sell a module the way you'd sell a movie, maybe to 6 players at a time or whatever, it's a limited theater with DMs that are skilled, not just skilled in DMing, but at that module, at that story. I think you'll start to see something really happen with VTTs. I see what Wizards is doing. They're assuming that you can just kind of channel the energy of the miniature portion of the game into a full scale, delivery system. And maybe you can to a degree, but honestly, when we play, we don't always use, I have a lot of miniatures and we don't always use, all the miniatures. A lot of times we just use dice, because all we're trying to figure out are angles and, cover and what's behind what, just to get the specifics of a combat down. I'm not sure that you need to have it completely dressed up and just beautiful. That's neat when you do, that can be fun, but realistically, that's not how people play. If you're doing that, you're focusing all your attention and time on developing that sort of groundwork for your games. I'd rather spend that time figuring out the games and playing the games, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. It's interesting because people have been trying to make professional dungeon mastering a thing since about 1980 or so, maybe even
Yeah.
earlier. And it never really became a thing. And lately, it's become a bit more of a thing because of online
Yeah.
play. So
Yep.
I do think you've got something about that. I don't think I would ever want to be a professional dungeon master, but there we go. I know a guy who is, but it's I don't know.
I think it
It
comes down to
seems
what you're
very
focused on. If you're producing materials that other people use, that's probably where it's best to spend your energies. That goes further, affects more people. More people can access the game through those materials, really. But if you are just focused on trying to make money as a dungeon master, I believe it can be done. I haven't seen a VTT pull out this kind of frame it the way that I think you would have to do it. I'm pretty sure there's a way to do it. To this day, it tempts me all the time. I think about it. I'm like, God, that's an avenue. That's actually an avenue. No one has gotten in there yet.
I could see that becoming a moneymaker for Wizards of the Coast if they did it, but I also think it would be horrific, right? Because you could just imagine that that it would be like, I don't know how to put it. It would be this. There would be all this Machiavellian plotting between different professional dungeon masters to cancel each other using Wizards rules, because undoubtedly they'd put all kinds of restrictions on
Oh, it would.
on
Yeah, it would
behavior
just
and
be
content
a
and all
shit
of that
show
sort
of
of
what.
thing. Like, it would be an absolute shit show. Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly what it would be. But someone mentioned in there that they wouldn't pay for a DM, and I've heard that. I don't think I would either. Personally, I wouldn't. But I am a DM and I know how to do it. But there's a hell of a lot of people around the world that would just like to play in a game, and they don't have a group of players. They don't even know probably anyone that knows how to play it, and they would happily slap down $50 to play in a game that's going to go over, say, 3 weeks. 2 games a week or 1 game a week for 3 hours, and that hasn't been done, and that certainly could be done, and it would work. You could rate the DMs, you could rate the players, you could kind of weed out the crazies. It would be good. I mean, except for the mad crazies. Mad hermits, you keep them in, but the crazy hermits, you throw them out.
Frank Destroso says, I'm going through Bill the Elf's videos and I'm jealous not to be a part of one of your tables. Well, thank you, Frank. That campaign is now on it's just finished year 11 basically of the campaign. So it's my longest running campaign, and it's still hilarious every time we play. It's so much
He is a really good DM. He doesn't take any shit. We try to throw him for he runs a game that, as far as I can tell, is just full of dungeon masters, right? Like, it's all DMs that are playing. And that, just playing with even one DM in your game is a little tricky, because DMs are constantly thinking like how they would make it better, like how they would do the same sort of scenes and stuff. Pundit doesn't put up with any crap. He'll kill you in an instant, and that keeps the tension good and high. And it's player directed. We all have to kind of make the story work on our own terms. It's excellent. It's an excellent game. One of the best I've been in. I've only had 3 DMs, and you're the third one. It's fantastic. I'm really happy to be in that game.
I have to say that the Sword and Caravan campaign, which is the only game I play online, right? All my other games are in person in my house, right? But the Sword and Caravan campaign is probably at this point. I mean, the Crusades part was kind of following by definition, because they were accompanying Richard. It was following the whole events of the Third Crusade, right? But after that, now you're on your own and you're going out all across the Silk Road, and it is the purest sandbox I've ever run, right? Because I don't plan really anything. I have the timeline
Right.
of events, right? So events happen, but you guys, the players decide absolutely everything they do, and then the other part that decides are the random tables. And one of the things about Sword and Caravan is that it has you can actually do that absolutely pure, right? As you're traveling along the road, there's encounter tables for events and things that happen on the road. You get to the city, there's events that are happening in the city, there's encounters in the city, and then you have all these tables of different factors, like will people in power notice you, and what will they do about you, and then places and things and people that you can randomly determine. So the tables at the back of Sword and Caravan that are like random aristocrats, random caravanserais, random mercenaries, random merchants, random pleasure houses, random ruins, random scholars, random Sufis, random tribesmen, random villages, and the random encounter tables in Wilderlands, right? So with all of those, I am just the clockmaker god of the setting, right? Like
Right.
I'm playing the characters that you interact with, and the events are determining themselves based on the things that the player characters decide to do. So
And this is the first time I've ever played in a purely sandbox game. So that's at first it's a little like, God, you got to get used to having your feet under you and prepared to move in your own directions, which is very fun. I just love that game.
These tables and the because I've gotten better as I go along at making tables in my books, right? Although I think I was always not bad at it, but it's one of the skills I've developed more and more as I keep making these books, and it'll be the same thing, for example, in Baptism of Fire, which is my next book that's coming out sometime soon. I don't know when.
Right.
But
people keep giving you shit about
They work so good that when an event happens, I think in the play, and you could tell me if you feel the same way or not, right? But I think in the actual play, the event can feel to the players as though this was like a pre-scripted event, right? Like this was something planned, right? And it's not. I'm making it up as I go along in the very moment of the role.
I noticed, like in our last game, we were just kind of causing you trouble basically for most of the session. But then when an actual encounter happened and like 3 of us missed saving throws right off the bat, I was like, oh God, here it goes. I'm going to die again. The tension levels are so high. All of us just all causing you trouble went out the window. We're just trying to figure out in that instant, how the hell do we survive this and get out of this? Thank God it worked out. And then afterwards we're all like, whew, let's just go back to the caravanserai and camp, stay out of trouble.
You said Pundit will kill you, but actually it's the setting that'll kill you, right? Because I never kill anyone on purpose. It's all
I know, but being a good DM, you certainly aren't going to stop us from fucking up so bad that we do end up dying. And so
one of the things that I have taken always as a lesson as a DM is never stop players from getting something that they've done legitimately, and never stop players from getting themselves killed for something that they've done legitimately, right?
Right.
Or sometimes just from bad luck, right? Or good luck, right? So
and I think that's definitely a key feature of OSR in general. I think if you don't have the tension of the fact that your character can die in a heartbeat over something stupid, the game loses an enormous amount of what it takes to make it very interesting, to draw you in. You really need that kind of tension and fear. That's why I like my old game Cold Steel Rain. Because it's a Wild West game, you got guns, and you can get in a gunfight if you want, but you're liable to die. You might be 10th level. You've been playing the character for 2 years, and some little pipsqueak, some kid would drop his gun and kill you on accident. It just happened like that. So it really changes the approach for players. I really like it. You got to have a high death quotient. It's got to be a damn real possibility at all times, I think.
Frank Destroso asks, "Is this the infamous Chris Miller?" No, this is Chris Miller is the Mad Scribe who publishes Sword and Caravan. This is the Mad Hermit who publishes the Pundit Files. So slightly different. They're both mad, apparently, but one is a scribe,
we're all mad here.
The other one has no job to speak of. So, let me see here. What else have people said? Kazakh says, pre-lockdown, my old LGS ran a ton of organized play for 5e, which was the only play option for a lot of people. Didn't have room at home, didn't know people, etc. Pretty successful. Yeah, well, organized play is a step away from professional DMing, isn't it?
It is, because there are some people that just need to be in a good game, or would like to be in a good game. I think you get to a point where you're an adult and maybe you don't have all your old friends around that you used to play with or whatever. You just want to play. Sometimes I think there should be an avenue for people to just go in and buy a ticket to a game, buy a ticket to ride for a few hours, play, have fun, jump out. And it's not Cold Steel Rain with a R-A-I-N. It's Cold Steel Rain, R-E-I-G-N, like the rain. It's a slightly sci-fi. Well, no, not even sci-fi. It's a post-apocalyptic western. A meteor has destroyed the world during the Civil War.
Space Zeus says a bunch of DMs playing with the guy who wrote the book. What could go wrong? Insane Nerd Rambling says one of the problems with modern D&D, and this extends back to 1E, is that they stopped emphasizing that you hire men-at-arms to accompany you. Well, yeah, it depends. I think, you know, I ran one campaign where I made a lot of emphasis on the players that they could hire men-at-arms, you know, and they eventually they came to the conclusion that they didn't really like that because then they weren't doing the work themselves, you know. So that's kind of funny in the way. I'm currently running Tonisborg as one of my campaigns.
I ordered that today.
It's a great book, and it's a great dungeon. They're going through a dungeon. We're playing with the Arneson rules that are in the Tonisborg book, and there they have a couple of men at arms, basically, plus one like hireling that his job is to carry the torches and to check for to unlock doors.
A torchbearer.
And so, like, you know, they've got 3 NPCs with them, right? But that's the limit of what they wanted, you know. So it kind of depends. I can understand that you know, like, you can run a game where you get a whole group of henchmen working with you, you know. But
we have in our Sword and Caravan campaign, we have a really good man-at-arms sort of character, but the other NPCs that are mainly involved are the ones that we adopt along the way. Like, we saved one, didn't we cure him of leprosy or something and picked up that Dwad or whatever his name is?
Dawood.
Dawood, that's it.
No, you rescued him from a slave caravan. You bought him.
Oh, that's right. Yep. Yeah. We made him. That's right. We made him look like he had leprosy so that we could get him out of it. That's right.
You got a cheap price for him. Yeah. Insane Nerd Rambling says Tonisborg rules same as fantasy campaign. No, these are the rules, are a recreation of the rules the way Arneson ran them in the early days, and like pre-publication, I think. And so I'm not sure how close or different they are from the first fantasy campaign.
Boy, is there anyone that got shorter shrift than Arneson out of this whole deal? I mean, if only he had lived longer, because it's only now his name is really people are hungry for more information about him. I feel like it's kind of the tragedy at the birth of D&D that he wasn't more embraced, wasn't brought in tighter.
Yeah. Well, I think that towards the end of his life, which was, you know, in the early 2000s, he got a lot of credit and a lot of people, you know, which was kind of like when the very beginnings of the OSR were coming out. He got some representation there. So, okay. Moving on to the other topic of the night. You guys might have heard, I mentioned it in some of my recent videos, that there is there's a product that's being put out by Wizards of the Coast. The interesting thing is Wizards of the Coast was supposed to put out its 3 core books for the 1 D&D. We're supposed to come out this year in celebration of the 50th anniversary of D&D. And now they've pushed back. Like, originally, it was very clearly going to come out May, June, July, or something like that, right? And now they've pushed it back. And they pushed it back so far that the 3rd book, which is the Monster Manual, isn't coming out until 2025, as it stands right now. And I think that there's like a couple of possibilities of why this is. The first, and the one that like the one that some people are saying, that the book isn't ready, right? But the one that I think is actually going on is that it's the virtual tabletop that isn't ready.
Yeah.
And they don't want to release the books without already having the virtual tabletop going or ready to go. Because because part of the goal here, and this is where it gets tricky, right, is that they want the people that adopt 1D&D to also adopt the VTT. So if the books come out 6 or 8 months before the VTT is ready, that's counterproductive to their corporate goals, which is that everyone moves to the virtual tabletop, right? And I suspect the virtual tabletop is a mess because, Wizards has never done a virtual tabletop that wasn't a mess. And so they're pushing back the date because of that, and so who knows?
They're in Seattle, so they do have those games in Seattle. The Renton Seattle, matrix there. They all know one another. If you've got a friend of a friend that's a star programmer at Microsoft somewhere, right? Everybody's connected.
Yeah.
I imagine they have everything it takes to put a really good VTT together. I just don't think that there's anyone left at WotC with enough knowledge about Dungeons and Dragons in general to make this work the way it needs to work. I think they're in trouble, and I bet they are. I bet they're digging for ground right now. I think they know it. They must know it. It's probably just going to be the most woke garbage that's ever been released into the world, and it's probably doomed to a flaming failure. I'm not even. I am voting against it. I guess I'm a little against it, but if it comes out and it's, I don't know, what would be decent? What would it be good enough that we could say, oh, well, they did pretty good? I don't think that there's a stage it's going to be highly successful. They've completely missed the point with role-playing games.
Well, I personally have no interest in a virtual tabletop, but the thing is, that every time Wizards, that is to say Hasbro, has tried to do a virtual tabletop, it's been a disaster, right? They tried it once quite a long time ago. I think it was in the 3 era, and it never materialized. Then the second time they tried it was during the 4E era, and at that time it fell apart because the guy in charge ended up in a murder-suicide situation with his lover, and and the whole thing collapsed, right? Like it's like they're cursed or something, right? And I'm guessing they're not doing any better this time, right? They probably, what they should have done is they should have farmed it out to a whole different company that is specialized.
That same company that did Baldur's Gate, they could have done it. Those people obviously even know the game better than WotC.
But they wanted to keep it in-house, right? And so there is this big delay. But the one thing that they are coming out with now is this book about the origins of D&D, 1970 to 1977 or something like that. And it's going to be this very large book that's going to be a deluxe product because they don't actually have a publishing arm anymore. They don't have a vice president of publishing. They've severed ties with Penguin, so they don't have distributors of actual books. And I suspect then that this book is being done by the department that is in charge of merchandise, right? It's actually merch, not a book, right? Although it is a book, obviously. But it's being done in a deluxe format. It's going to be like $100. The main appeal of this book allegedly is that it's going to have the earliest, never before published draft of D&D from like the original material from Gary Gygax, and it's going to have a bunch of letters that happened between Gygax and Arneson, and it's going to have some of Arneson's stuff in it, and all of this, right? And then also based on, as I mentioned in one of my recent videos, based on the fact that they did a video about that was basically an infomercial for this book, right? A pre-release infomercial about this book. And at the end of it, they said basically that Gygax and Arneson were extremely problematic, and that their product would never have passed a diversity reader reader conditions in the modern era. I suspect this book will probably also have in it some kind of introduction or postscript essay about how this is actually a terrible product, right? Because this is full of problematic stuff, and how modern D&D is not like this, and you probably shouldn't play this, or something like that, But the interesting news is that actually the stuff that was a lot of the stuff that is going to be in the this book that is, you know, supposedly the big new thing that would make it interesting was in fact, it is in fact in the how do you call it, the public record regarding a lawsuit that happened between Arneson and Gygax. It's in the National Archive, and a lot of it has been now put out on the internet, right? So you can actually see what this is right now without buying the book. Okay, so I'm not sure if they knew this or not. I'm not sure if they were aware of it, but a lot of places have put it out. There's been on the RPG site, there's a thread that was started by the guy who made Secrets of Blackmoor, by the guy who made Tonnisburg, called the Arneson versus Gygax dossier. And there's a link there where you can download the entire trove of this public record of this lawsuit, which includes the documents of all of that stuff.
Sure.
Right? And I've seen that other people have published it in other places also, you know. So once again, Wizards is kind of ending up getting screwed by this sort of situation. I like the OGL fiasco and now this, you know. So, you know, I think that they were counting on this being something like that had novel stuff. Because it wasn't just a reproduction of the OD&D box set, which they did back when, you might recall, back when 5e first came out, they did reprints of the 3 AD&D books, and they did reprints of a reprint of the original box set. But yeah, so if you want to see what is in there, you can see what's in there already on the internet now. So it's very, I think that's very funny. And, you know, I'm sure that there's interesting stuff there about like the origins of D&D, and there, you know, I know that there's some stuff like there's a part where Gygax was experimenting with using like a spell point mechanic, which he obviously threw away. The combat system, a lot of it is actually, some of the stuff in there is very similar to what is in the Tonnisburg rules, where, for example, the combat is less focused on a bonus to hit incrementing as you go up in level, and more focused on getting a number of attacks against opponents of lower level, right? So you get multiple attacks. Opponents. It's something that was very common in like wargaming at that time, right? So there are some significant differences in how that game would have looked versus how D&D actually looks, you know.
Are you familiar with Dangerous Journeys? Gygax's game after he left D&D. What'd you think of that?
I thought it was way too rules heavy and not to my taste, you know. But
it got closer to my crunchy heart. I really like Dangerous Journeys. Well, I thought it was pretty.
It was crushed by TSR, but I suspect that even so, had it not been, I think it might have done better than it did because of the lawsuit that TSR put against him. But I don't think it would have been like it wouldn't have replaced D&D, you know. Like I don't think.
It was a hell of a game. I mean, that guy knew his trade by the time he wrote Dangerous Journeys, and it's very, very well put together. I was really impressed with it. I'm a Rollmaster fanatic. I fell in love with MERPs and then went right into Rollmaster. Oh my God. To this day, Rollmaster just owns my heart on some levels. Those poor bastards, they cannot get a design team and artists to save themselves. So it may never produce the kind of sales that game should, but Rollmaster's a good game. If you can handle the charts, not everyone can, but I'm a crunch monkey. I love it crunchy, and doesn't get crunchier than Rollmaster, but Dangerous Journey's close. Pretty crunchy.
I played MERP, and that was like the farthest limit of rules heavy I could stand, you know.
Merc is a great game. You know, Merc is one of those games that it has a feeling, to me, it has a feeling that almost no other role-playing game has. I don't know what it is about Middle-earth role-playing at MERPs, not Mercs. That particular game system is very distinct. It has a distinct flavor that really permeates the entire game, and I love it. It's a good game.
Yeah. All right, so let's see some comments here. Frank Destrosa said, I bought myself a bunch of these Missouri Meerschaums. This is a Missouri Meerschaum. if you're gonna buy corn cobs, you buy Missouri Meerschaums. Go online, $12 a pop, and they're incredible pipes. And Cornell and Deal cream and apricot. Well, I'll forgive you for that, but okay. I do not like tobacco that doesn't taste like tobacco. And let's see. Steambub says, I've heard that there was infighting between the VTT team and the Beyond team. I didn't know that.
That's interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
That makes sense, of course, because the Beyond group would know their D&D, and at this point, Wizards of the Coast just does not care about that game at all.
Insane Nerd Rambling says, I have no intention of giving WotC any more money. Well, that's kind of where my point is. I've said this in the previous video where I told people, buy Tonnesburg instead, because, they obviously are doing this book that's full of member berries for the fanatical collectionist, and I'm sure that there are going to be a lot of people that'll end up falling for it. But honestly,
you spend 30, 40 years buying those books. You just, to this day, even though I know they're producing nothing but trash, when I see a new one, something in my heart's like, oh, a new D&D book. But then I have to remind myself, but it's been produced by the Mad Cult, so it sucks.
Frank Destrasso also says, between Gillespie, Crawford, and Pundit, we have our own Gygax and Arneson. So I don't know about that. I'm not sure I would want to say that. I would say that I've done some innovative things in the OSR, but that's always, everybody in the OSR is standing on the shoulders of giants. They're the ones that came up with the thing first. And that's
which is just incredible. We had pencils, paper, dice for hundreds of years. Could have come up at any time. Took until the 70s.
Yeah, it's a whole other level to be the one that invents something completely new like that.
Personally, I feel like it's an evolution of storytelling. It's an absolutely new form of storytelling, and those men invented it out of whole cloth, and they're well worthy of deep respect for it, because it's a work of genius. It changed the world.
Steambub says, I'd rather buy Secrets of Blackmoor documentary and The Lost Dungeons of Tonnesburg than WotC's Orwellian retelling. What else have we got here? Insane Rambling says, Lord of the Rings RPG is superior to MERP.
I've looked at it a little bit. I didn't want to devote that much time to learning that system. I just have nostalgic love for MERP.
Insane Nerd Ramblings adds, plate armor has no place in Middle-earth.
It's also kind of sucky in Rollmaster. It can get you killed as much as save you.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so any other comments here from the chat? Anybody got questions for either me or the Mad Hermit? Calvinani says Griff, the guy who did Tonnesburg, is working on another documentary on old D&D. Well, that's good.
Cool.
I like his first documentary. If you haven't seen Secrets of Blackmoor, that is a remarkable documentary about the origins of the hobby. And I'm not a big fan of documentaries about D&D or stuff like that. Right? I've never seen one.
Well, I am.
Or D&D shows or whatever. Right? But that one is really worth it. That one actually looks at interesting stuff about the whole history.
Hey, Hackmaster looks good to me. I see somebody's in there asking about Hackmaster. I have not played it. I've sold it in my game stores when I had them. And I know it's tongue-in-cheek, but my God, the systems all seem pretty legit from what I could tell, what I looked through, and, the little amount that I figured out, I thought, God, they really actually made a workable game here.
Where's Mendes? Is that from my DCC game, Frank? That's a long time back now. That DCC, that must be from 2 years ago or so. My DCC game, my Last Sun game is so old now that it has memes that are now. It's that's an old meme from that campaign. All right. Well, let me see if there's any other things to talk about. looking at the RPG site here for like 5 headlines or something. I was Matt Walsh or something.
Matt Walsh of role-playing games.
One of the things that that has been pointed out about among the many horrible things about Wizards of the Coast, right? Or that has been pointed out about the OSR is the incredible variety of settings and genres that it has. One of the great advantages I think that the OSR has had in this is because in Wizards now, every single setting is the same, right? Like not in terms of the outer trappings, but that every single setting is basically the current year wearing some kind of cosplay, you know? And so in the OSR, there's a lot of games where the setting is, you know, based on some historical culture or some completely self-created setting culture. And it is definitely not like 2024 Seattle in the present age. And
it's amazing how that flavor gets infested into all that Wizards product, though. They just can't seem to recognize it for what it is. It's too bad because a lot of really creative people in Seattle. It's honestly was maybe the place to be in the late 90s. The center of the world was Seattle, but they just all went woke.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that from their point of view, if you present something, you're endorsing that, right? So this is why, for example, that there can be no slavery in D&D now, right? Because if you have a setting where there are slaves, even if you make it really clear, even if it's like, you know, against the slave lords, right? Even if you're opposed to it, you're somehow promoting it by having it there, you know. And
I got really mad at their lighter, fluffier drow. God, that made me pissed. They seem to take all the coolness out of drow. People love drow. I did. I love that whole race. I just loved it.
Drows have black skin. They think it's racist if they're evil, you know? Like,
which is just infuriating. You know, I think we had cured racism by the 80s. Personally, in my opinion, didn't seem to be even a factor, but they brought it back powerfully.
Yeah. Dractoni says, when making a game, are you ever worried about using rules similar to other rule sets? Like when you made Lords of Olympus, how did you work around that? Well, my games are almost always based on other rule sets because the OSR is based on the old school D&D rules. Rules are not copyrightable, right? So anybody can make a product that has the same set of rules. What you can't do is you can't cut, you know, go to a D&D PDF and go cut and then paste it, right? You have to rephrase it entirely in your own words, right? But you can.
And apparently, you can't use Dungeon Master or DM as an acronym.
Yeah, well, because those are supposedly trademarked, but you know that's not.
I didn't know that. If I was a bazillionaire, I'd sue over that. I swear.
Yeah, they'd probably lose if someone actually went to the ring on it. You know. As far as Lords of Olympus was intentionally based on the rule set of Amber with a totally different setting. So again, no problem there, right? Because there's nothing against the Zelazny estate there, which could have been, you know, like that is something that you couldn't just copy, right, from Amber Diceless. But it was done that way intentionally because Eric Wujcik, who created Amber, among many other famous RPGs like
I met him,
Ninjas and Super Spies, and TMNT, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He had made Amber, and Amber had gone out of print for a long time, and then he died, right? And Wujcik was a mentor of mine. I'd known him for about 10 years or so. He had been a huge influence on me as a DM, and then later when I started making games, that influence spread onto the game design, right? So it was.
I think, first of all, that's fascinating, Pundit, that you knew him. I love that. That's incredible. I met him. He came through Kalispell, Montana once on his way to Seattle, and he stopped at my game store, and he spent the afternoon with us, and he ran games. And he was brilliant. And he ran this diceless game where we just sat around the table and he put us through our paces. incredible GM. I really liked that guy. He was a good guy.
Everybody says the same thing about him. And so what I wanted to do was make sure that the Amber game, like the diceless game that he created, wouldn't disappear, right? Because at that time it looked like it would, and right around the time that I was publishing Lords of Olympus, another fan of Eric's produced Lords of Gossamer and Shadow, which is another Amber clone, where Lords of Olympus was based on Greek mythology, but Lords of Gossamer and Shadow was a kind of it wasn't Amber with the Amber setting with the serial number filed off, but it was a setting that had many similarities to Amber, but different enough that there was no question that it wasn't ripping off Roger Zelazny's novels, right? So they came out with that too, so no, as a rule, I think that the idea of making a new system completely of your own 9 times out of 10 is probably a worse idea than designing a game using the knowledge of existing systems that have worked, and following the model of those systems. Whether or not you do something like in the OSR where you're doing it completely within that framework, or at least you're doing something inspired by it, that tends to produce better games because you're relying on something that has already been tried and true,
Right. Steambub writes down there that he wanted to write up a Drow setting book because the Paizo retcon WotC's gray morality. They need to be a fear-based, matriarchal, sadistic, there's a word I can't pronounce, society. Monolatry society.
Monolatry.
Yeah, I too, Steambub, I'm with you. I also devoted a great deal of time and love to a Drow campaign that I was going to release and still might someday. It's very big though. It's very big. It's hard. It's a little bit unmanageable, but I fell in love with it. And WotC, they came out and switched their Drow stuff around right when I was in the middle of writing all that. And I realized that word belongs to them, and that made me a little mad. So I changed it a little to Dreu, because there are some Drow cities called like Wade Draelven. I don't know if you've heard of that. They use a DRAU abbreviation in there for the portion of that word that could stand for Drow. So I just changed it to that. But someday.
I'm going to be honest that I never particularly liked the Drow. I always thought, and especially I hated the Drow after the Drizzt novels started coming out. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Everybody wanted to play a renegade Drow with scimitars, right? It's just annoying.
Right.
And so in the World of the Last Sun, in my DCC campaign, you have the Shadow Elves, right, which are dark elves, right, that look totally badass. They have scimitars, they have spiky armor, they have all this stuff. But they have high little squeaky voices like this, right? So nobody and they're always really mad about how no one's taking them seriously. They're supposed to be badass. So that is my revenge on the Drow and on people who like to play. BGC, you were asking about the end of Portuguese D&D. Yes, that's true. We talked about it earlier in the live stream. You must have arrived a bit late. So you'll have to go back to see what we were saying about that. So what else have we got here? Make Drow evil again, says BGC. Yeah, well.
Yeah, right. The bumper sticker says that.
Stop being evil at all, it's really pointless.
Hey, speaking of, I got a question for you. This is a weird question. How do you pronounce Loth? Do you pronounce it Loth or Loth?
I pronounce it Loth.
Loth? Yeah. I pronounce it Loth. I just like it Loth.
Silent bell in the middle. Uriah Grant Edwards asks, what am I puffing on? I am currently smoking St. James Flake, which is by Samuel Gawith. Yeah, St. James Flake. It's a Virginia Perique blend.
Shirley thinks that the Drow are like Borg, too used. They probably are, but God, it's because we all love them.
Wholesome Golf says, favorite type of tobacco. Well, I don't have a single favorite, but I have a few blends or brands that I really love. My workaday favorite is actually an Argentinian brand called Argento Natural, which is just pure burley, nothing in it, right? No additives, no flavoring, no nothing. But it's a good quality of burley, and you can smoke it all the time, right? And then
check out what Nerd Ramblings just said. He said, literally, Loth and her followers are not the ones attacking the surface. It's the followers of the EEG.
Apart from that, my favorite fancy tobacco, the one that I would recommend to someone if they wanted like the highest grade of tobacco, is actually a Solani brand called Solani Aged Burley Flake. That is an amazing tobacco. So there you go. That's my one, is the one I smoke all the time, and the other one is like the one that you.
Is it? What's the availability? Is it? Do you have different tobacco strains down there in Uruguay than you do up in America?
No, there's the tobacco is the same, but it just, different regions might have slight different taste variants, and of course in different places either Burley or Virginia tobacco will grow better, right? And so in South America, it's largely Burley tobacco, which is a coarser type of tobacco, and the one in Argentina nowadays is very good, but that's kind of my fault because when I first there's this large Argentinian company that manages tobacco in Argentina, and because of connections that I had, I ended up getting a tour of their place, and they were just starting the pipe tobacco at that point to make their own, because they were importing pipe tobacco from other countries at the time. And I gave them a few suggestions about it, right? Because at the time the tobacco was not particularly good, but I just got a random bite from Meatball. That's a love bite though. And so they, I think they took some of it to heart, because over the when I first tried that Argento line, it was pretty awful. Like the cut was bad, the crop wasn't good. And the next time I tried it was several years later, because I just had thought, oh, it's not good. And one time I had to smoke it because I didn't have anything else on hand, and I got some. And all of a sudden it was really good, So they had they'd done some serious improvements in between my first visit and now. Let me see what else we've got here. I'm still behind you here. I'm catching up with this. Lol followers, the Drow. But yeah, now
I think Drow is owned by him.
It is not official D&D Wizards canon that the majority of Drow are actually good Drow, and like the evil Drow that were always, supposed to be the real Drow, are a tiny group of evil renegades.
So there's a whole bunch of Drow that don't worship Lolth. Is that what they're saying?
The majority
I don't get that.
of Drow do not worship Lolth. Yeah, they're
bullshit.
They're good yeah, that is
bullshit. I say bullshit from the old school division here. Bullshit.
Frank Destroso, not Solani Burley, Solani Aged Burley Flake. That's the name of it. Very hard to get because it's always in high demand, and it's not a cheap tobacco to buy anywhere, but in most places, plus the tobacco tax is pretty brutal.
I'm not sure if they own the concept of dark elves, but I think the term Drow is theirs.
They can't possibly own the concept of dark elves because you have that.
No, not at all.
Germanic
that's old.
The Svartalfur, right, which were basically dark elves, So, yeah. But the name Drow, the word Drow might be.
Yeah, that might belong to them. Them, I say with disdain.
A lot of people.
Those bastards own my favorite game.
I strongly disapprove of aromatic tobaccos. What you want to get is really a nice, high grade Virginia or Burley or Virginia Perique or English blend, which has Latakia. Any of those that have no special flavoring added to them, right? Because then they're going to, you're going to be tasting the actual high quality tobacco. Anything that has flavoring in it, you're just masking shitty tobacco, I think. That's not totally true, because there are some high-end tobacconists that make aromatics, but even those, like, what the hell's the point? Yeah. I'm in a minority on that, though. I recognize it. All right. So anything else that we want to talk about before we wrap things up? We've gone for about 2 hours now, I think. So that's a pretty good one.
Yeah, pretty good one.
Well, do you have any final things you want to say or want to promote or something like that before we finish off?
Well, check out my Mad Hermit Almanac. Number 1 and number 2 are out. You can get them at the Red Room. You can get them on drive-through. I think number 2 is kind of cool because it's got, I threw in a huge section of story hooks, and I was kind of excited to see what people think of those. So check those out, because I think I put in some pretty good hooks in there. And I'm trying to do a larger concept with story hooks in the background, so I'm curious to see reactions and see how things go with that. Otherwise, keep appraised. If you see Night of the Sun Volume 2, which is called Bleeding Light. Bleeding Light is the name of my next module. That will be out in about 2 or 3 months on Kickstarter. We will, at that time, we'll also, you can purchase the first module with the second one, and we will change that first module before this printing, so that if you purchased the game earlier, like the first module through the first Kickstarter, that book is still unique. It will still stay just like that. What we do is we set up a book for the Kickstarter. Then everyone that purchases that book on Kickstarter gets exactly that book, and we don't redo that in any other printing. We'll change all future printing so that you have just that one book that was sold at that Kickstarter. If you don't get it at that time, you would have to trade or purchase it off market to get that book again. I'm an RPG collector. I really like to collect, like people that have just gone to Kinko's and kind of spiral bound or something, their own gaming supplements. I am a sucker for those, and I love them, and I have a huge collection of them. I really do. I'm a devotee of that stuff, and so as a collector, I know what you want for collecting. So we make sure that the stuff we put out, especially in the book form, you're going to get it's a one of a kind. It's going to be a low print run. It's something you won't be able to get in that form again in the future. So that's one of the things we pay a lot of attention to, Sean and I, my business partner. So when you see that come up, please, by all means, check it out. You'll be able to get the first module and the second, or just the second. I'm not sure if there's another booklet coming out with that or not. I don't think so. I think we're just doing the 2 modules on this. So hopefully if you see it, you'll remember me and take a peek at it, see what you think, and let me know. I'd like some feedback on it. We'll also be doing a play test of it that'll probably be live. I like to do that so that people can see the game in action. That'll just be up on my YouTube channel, or maybe on the Mad Hermit Games YouTube channel. I don't always handle that. My business partner's in charge of some of that, so wherever he puts it. But I'll let you know, Pundit. Maybe you can let everybody know during one of your live streams when we start doing that.
For sure. So. Glad to. All right. So everybody, if you're watching, if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button, because that always helps with the views. I only see a couple of likes on there right now, so be sure to share the video anywhere you think people find it interesting once it's compiled in video form. And
thank you everybody for taking the time to listen to us and for welcoming me in here. Thank you, Pundit, for allowing me to come on. It was
my pleasure.
It was an honor.
Check out the Mad Hermit's books, and check out all my products. I'll adjust the description once this goes to video to include a link to whatever the Mad Hermit wants to send me for links. And check out all my other products, especially, of course, the Pundit Files. There's already 6 issues out now, so that's a lot to get. You can get the Pundit Files from the Red Room, and they only cost about $3.50. So be sure to. And
there's links to my products in the Pundit File. So just buy a Pundit File, and you got access to my stuff too.
Right there. Yeah, there you go. That works well. So be sure to check all that out. Oh, someone's already subbed to your channel. There you go.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you.
All right. So guys, I don't have a fixed date unlike a lot of professionals like Double D. I don't do these live streams whenever. In the summer, I tend to do them more than in the, in the South American summer. I tend to do them a lot more than in the winter because in the winter, a lot of times I've got other stuff going on, but I'm sure I'll be doing another one sometime soon and I'll let you all know. So thank you.
This has been fun, Pundit. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great. And thank you to everybody who was on the chat and who contributed, especially the super chat people. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you all soon. More videos to come, no doubt. Take care, everyone.
See you guys.